Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Built Heritage Subcommittee. I can see that we're still awaiting potentially one more member for quorum, so we'll just continue to wait. We see that the vice chair isn't here, and there are some other members who aren't here, so we'll just wait another minute, and once we reach quorum, we'll start the proceedings.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. And I just told everybody we'd just wait another minute to get to quorum. I think we're there, but I see that the vice chair has also come in, so I think that we can begin so that we are orderly and can go through our program relatively quickly. So good morning and welcome to the Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting of August 31st, 2021. I'd like to call the members to order. Due to the continuing state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being held remotely. Though we are meeting virtually, the land on which Ottawa is built upon is unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that the people of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people and land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. The City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. As noted earlier, this meeting is being held through Zoom. Those who do not need to participate in the meeting can also watch it live on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel. A reminder to participants to please keep your microphones muted until I call upon you to speak. I will provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item in the order in which they raise their hand in Zoom. For panelists, the raise hand option is found at the bottom of the participants list. For those calling in, press *9 to raise your hand. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for those cues. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declarations of interest in writing to the coordinator at their earliest opportunity. Although the deadlines have passed for residents to register to speak and provide written submissions to this subcommittee, residents may still make submissions to Planning Committee and Council. If you have technical difficulties signing into the meeting, you can contact the committee coordinator by calling 613-580-2424, extension 22953. A reminder that if participants are having technical issues with their Zoom connection, they may call in using the backup telephone number provided by the coordinator. Today, I have only received regrets from Member Hassel. Could the committee coordinator please call the roll? A reminder to members to unmute themselves when they're called.
Member Halsell, Member Podolsky.
Yes, present.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Member Comforti.
Present.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Vice Chair Quinn.
Present.
Chair King. You have quorum,
Present.
Chair.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, are the minutes of Tuesday, June 8th, 2021 confirmed?
Carried.
Confirmed. So our first order of business pertains to planning, infrastructure, and economic development, right-of-way, heritage, and urban design services. Number one, an application for new construction at 406 Bank Street, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Can staff please provide an overview of this report?
Okay, great. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can.
Great, okay. So this application this morning is an application for new construction at 406, 408 Bank Street. If we go to the next slide, it's a property designated as part of the Centertown Heritage Conservation District, and it's located on the west side of Bank Street, at the corner of Florence Street. Next slide. So this property is a non-contributing property in the HCD as it's currently vacant. The original building was destroyed by a fire in 2002. And if we go to the next slide, these are a bit of context. So in the top image, the view is looking south on Bank Street. You can see some of the surrounding contributing properties across Bank and to the south on Florence. And then in the bottom image, of course, the property next door at 390 Bank, which received approval for redevelopment last year. Next slide. So the applicant is looking to construct a new mixed-use 6-story building on the lot with residential units on the upper floors and commercial space on the ground floor. So this is the site plan. And as you can see, the proposed building footprint will cover the majority of the lot, set close to each of the lot lines. A zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted concurrently, and that's to request site-specific relief to the TM zoning provisions for height, setbacks, and parking requirements, as well as the heritage overlay. And a site plan application is also required. If we go to the next slide, this is the landscape plan. So since the footprint covers most of the lot, there's very little landscaping. However, there are 2 street trees in the right of way along Bank, which are to remain. There's 2 street trees on Florence, which will require removal. However, the applicant is working with forestry staff and their arborists to replant both of those. Next slide. So these are the elevations of the building on Florence and Bank. So as you can see, it's proposed to be clad mainly in red brick with glazing on the ground floor and gray paneling for the upper 2 floors. So it has a mix of balconies with glazed railings, and those are proposed on both the Bank and Florence facades. The ground floor will be recessed to align with the neighboring property, and step backs have also been introduced up above the 4th floor. And on Bank, those step backs are set back about 1.5 meters, and on Florence, it's about 0.6 meters. I think if we go to the next slide. So the Centertown Heritage Conservation District guidelines provide direction for new mixed-use construction on Bank, and staff have reviewed the proposal against those guidelines and are satisfied it meets their objectives. Although the height will be taller than recommended in the guidelines, the massing with the proposed setbacks will reflect the low-rise character of Bank Street, and the use of red brick will help it to be compatible. The design will be clearly contemporary, and the applicant has made efforts to pick up some references to traditional elements such as the brick cornice and string course, and also the residential window styles, which help it be sympathetic to the HCD. We go to the next slide. Staff have also reviewed this proposal against the standards and guidelines and the secondary plan and CDP for Centertown to ensure, which provide policies and guidelines to ensure Centertown's cultural heritage value is conserved. And staff are also satisfied that that the proposal is consistent with those documents as well. If we go to the next slide, in terms of consultation, this application has followed Heritage Planning Branch's standard notification procedures as outlined on the screen. The Centertown Community Association provided comments to the zoning application, which have been incorporated into the report. And those comments included some concerns with respect to the removal of trees and also setbacks, particularly for the upper floors. And as I mentioned, the applicant has made some efforts to introduce an additional step back on Florence Street to help provide some transition to the neighborhood on the other side. And just to sum up on the next, the final slide here, staff are recommending approval of the application subject to conditions related to providing exterior cladding samples and lighting and signage details to ensure they are consistent with the HCD plan, and that would be through the site plan application and before building permit issuance, and also recommendations to delegate minor design changes and for the heritage issuance, the heritage permit issuance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie, for the detailed report. We did receive correspondence from Heritage Ottawa on August 27th in support of these recommendations. We do have a number of registered speakers. The registered speakers that we have to go first are on behalf of the applicant, both from 410 and SDS Architect. If you have a presentation, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair. I am Nathan Patrician. I'm a planner with FOTEN, and I'm joined by Lisa Della Rosa, who's an associate at FOTEN Planning and Design, as well as our project architect, Susan Smith, who I actually cannot see on the call, but I hope that she has joined here as well. We did register as speakers, however, do not have a presentation and are more so here to answer any questions should they come up. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions for the applicant's team? Oh, and I think I see Councillor McKinney has raised their hand.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. I had minimized the screen and I couldn't get it back on time. Just a quick question. I support the application. The concern I share with the community and neighbors, of course, is the trees and tree retention, and I appreciate the replacement plan, but I just wonder if you could give more detail today on what the plan is to ensure that the trees on Florence are the large mature trees will be protected, and how you're going to go about doing that. Not just that you will, but just what the plan is for the protection during construction.
Right, I can speak to that. It does show as part of the application, we did submit a tree conservation report as well as a landscape plan. I know that your concern is specifically related to the trees along Florence. There are 2 mature trees along Bank Street, which are going to be retained and protected during construction. And I believe the tree conservation report speaks to some mitigation measures and recommendations for protecting them, including fences and no storage or vehicle traffic or construction activity taking place within that treed area. As for the trees along Florence, it is shown on the landscape plan as tree number 3, which is the one closest to Bank Street, which is a mature oak tree. Which the critical root zone does go below where the excavation is to be. So that tree will need to be removed and replaced. And then there is another tree just a little bit further west along Florence Street that is both in the path of the service connection as well as in the path of the loading bay along Florence Street. So that tree is also proposed to be removed and replaced. And then on the landscape plan that was submitted as part of the application, it does show the replacement of those 2 trees. And unfortunately, because of the loading bay area, as well as those underground connections, that tree can't be replaced exactly where it was before, but it does show 2 green pillar pin oak trees that are being replaced sort of in a similar location to where tree number 3 is, closest to Bank Street.
Okay, no, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the replacement plan. I just want to reiterate that it's critical to when we are retaining trees in a construction zone that we plan for heavy vehicular movement, digging, vibrations, whatever, and that can cause stress to a tree and ultimately kill it. So the fact that we have mature trees on Bank Street and around the corner on Florence really is a miracle today. We don't have many of those in the downtown full-grown trees, so I appreciate the plans for protecting those, and I'll be watching closely. Thank you.
Thank you for those observations and questions. Are there any more questions for the applicant's team? Seeing none, the other registered speaker on this item is David Fleming from Heritage Ottawa.
I'm not seeing him, Chair, but give me a moment just to double check.
Okay, appreciate that.
I'm not seeing him, Chair.
Okay, we do know that Mr. Fleming did submit a letter in support of the recommendations on behalf of Heritage Ottawa. Does the committee have any questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, do any of the members have any comments generally on this item before it goes to a vote? And I see that Member Podolsky has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I think that I would be supporting the staff recommendation, and I would like to compliment the architect for quite a sensitive treatment and massing of the proposed infill development on this corner. It's an important corner, and it helps to strengthen the continuity of Bank Street once this building will be built. And I think that probably the architect would have liked to have had a larger setback on the Florence Street side for the 5th and 6th stories, as been urged by some neighbors. But I can understand on such a small property that the gross floor area is important to maintain. And I just wanted to say that I appreciated the work that the architect has done in order to create a building that has references to Bank Street in its historic buildings, while being a modern building. But more importantly, I think the proportions of it and the detailing is really quite excellent, and I compliment her on that.
Thank you for those comments, Member Podolsky. Is there any more comments from the committee? Seeing none, I would just like to concur with Barry's comments that I think that the proposal is sympathetic to the heritage character of the area. I think it's very important that there was some consultation and some back and forth as well with the community association to ensure step backs. And I would also like to really support my colleague, Councillor McKinney's observations around the focus on tree retention. So I'm pleased to support this item that's before us. And I'd like to ask the committee, is the report carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Carried. This report is scheduled to be presented to Planning Committee on September 9th, 2021. The second item before us is an application to alter 207 Clemo Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Can staff please provide an overview of this report?
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is an application, as mentioned, to alter the property at 207 Clemo Avenue. So it's a property in the Clemo-Monkland driveway in Linden Terrace Heritage Conservation District. It's a new district in the glebe that was designated last year. If we go to the next slide, so 207 Clemo is located in the first block west of Bank Street on the north side of Clemo, just in from the corner of Lyon Street. On the next slide, for some context, in the top left view, this is the view looking east down Clemo, And at the bottom right, this is the view across view of the properties across the street. So as you can see, the district is characterized by its wide avenues lined with mature trees and framed by deeply set back houses on either side. The houses are an eclectic mix with different influences of styles, many being architect designed with high quality materials and craftsmanship. Next slide. So the existing property contains a 2-story stucco-clad house with an attached sunroom wing on the west side. It features characteristic attributes of the HCD, including the large trees in the front yard, the walkway leading from the sidewalk, and a shared driveway. It was evaluated as a contributing property, but its simplicity makes it a bit of an anomaly in the HCD. If we go to the next slide. So this building was originally designed by prominent local architect W.E. Nofke. So I have 2 sets of plans on the screen, and Nofke's plans are on the left. However, the house appears to have been built by an unknown contractor, and so those drawings are on the right, and you can see that those are a much more modest version of Nofke's original plans, particularly in the roofline and the front entrance. So this proposal is to largely retain and rehabilitate the existing house, making some alterations that take some inspiration from Nofke's original plans in order to help ensure its continued compatibility. And the owner has worked quite closely with their heritage consultant and their architect to carefully consider this approach. And a heritage impact statement and conservation plan was prepared by Commonwealth Historic Resource Management, and that's attached to the staff report. We go to the next slide. This is the front elevation of the proposal. So the project would include lifting, raising the existing house to construct a new stone foundation, adding new dormers at the roof level, replacing the existing windows, as well as replacing the stucco cladding. The upper floor cladding would be replaced in kind, but the applicant would like to replace the ground floor cladding with brick. So on the right is the elevation for a new detached garage, which is to be located at the rear of the property. And if we go to the next slide, this is the site plan. So in order to accommodate that the garage at the rear, sorry, Eric, if we go one more. The application also includes a request to reposition the house forward on the lot by about 2 meters. And so the red area on the screen, that's the existing footprint of the house, and the new areas would be in gray. If we go to the next slide, this is just quickly here, the elevation of the building at the rear, which is proposed to have a bit more of a contemporary design, particularly in the windows. And in the next slide, this is the east facade showing a small addition on the ground floor. And the next slide again, this is the west facade showing the reconstructed sunroom that will be reconstructed once the building has been shifted forward, and it will be slightly narrower in order to meet the zoning bylaw. So if we go the next slide, a full review of the proposal against the new HCD plan and applicable standards and guidelines has been included as part of the staff report. And generally, staff have determined that it meets the intent of both of those documents. Although shifting and lifting contributing houses is not something we would typically support, given that this approach will allow the house to be conserved and rehabilitated, and ensuring the character defining attributes of the HCD and the overall cultural heritage value will be conserved. Staff are supportive in this case. Now there are several conditions, so I'll run through them quickly here. And these have been proposed to better align the proposal with the HCD plan. So if we go to the next slide, the first relates to the cladding. And actually, if we go one more, Eric, just to have the images on the screen there too. So the HCD plan has explicit policies for conserving historic cladding, noting that when replacement is required, it should be in kind. So the first condition would require repair or reinstatement of the existing stucco on both the upper and ground floor of the house being lifted and repositioned. And that's to help also more clearly distinguish between the existing house and the new areas towards the rear. So similarly, the HCD plan has policies for windows, which contemplate replacement, but recommend matching the design. So you'll see the existing windows on the front facade are 1/1 sliding units. So the second condition would require that these be replicated. So both of these conditions are intended to better meet both the plan and Parks Canada standards and guidelines, which speak to repairing rather than replacing, and replacement in kind when necessary, and also ensuring that new elements be compatible, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place, while maintaining the integrity of the existing house as a physical record of its time. If we go to the next slide, as there's some risk with lifting a building, the second condition has been included to provide a protection measures plan for staff's approval. And I see this sort of being an addendum to the conservation plan that was submitted. And really this is to ensure that the building and its important attributes, particularly the cladding, the canopy, and the decorative glass windows, will be protected and conserved during the lifting and construction process. And if we go to the last slide, this is the last condition, and that relates to the retention of the existing trees in the front yard, which are important in maintaining the character of the HCD. So the applicant is working with an arborist and city forestry staff on a tree information report, which would be required to be submitted before the issuance of a building permit. And that is to have specific protection measures to ensure those trees can be maintained. So the next slide, just in terms of consultation, this project has benefited quite significantly from consultation with representatives from the community association and staff to ensure it aligned with the plan and best practices in conservation. Several pre-consultation meetings were held over the last year, despite this district not being part of the pre-consultation pilot. The applicant has been quite collaborative with staff and the community. And so just quickly to wrap up, in summary, staff are recommending approval of the application subject to the conditions in the report, and also to delegate minor design changes and issue the heritage permit with a 2-year expiry date. Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie, for that presentation. I see that Councillor Menard has his hands raised, but let's wait for questions to staff after we hear from our registered speakers. We did receive correspondence from David Fleming from Heritage Ottawa in a letter dated August 27th in support of the recommendations. We do have 2 registered speakers on behalf of the applicant, John Stewart and Barry Hoban, and Todd Duckworth of Hoban Architecture and Commonwealth Historic Resource Management. So let's hear from the team on behalf of the applicant first, and then we have another person as well registered.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Todd Duckworth from Hoban Architecture. I sent a series of slides yesterday that I'll use to make a brief presentation. So I'd like to thank Ms. Kim for her presentation. And as she mentioned, we've been collaborating for approximately a year now, quite productively with both herself as well as members of the Glebe Community Association. Plenty of back and forth and adjustments over the past year to the proposed design. The owner of the property has been quite cooperative through that process. And we thank Ms. Kim for her report and recommendations. What I'd like to speak to specifically today is with respect to the proposed condition A, with respect to the material cladding of the building. Just as a preface, it's the design proposal as well as the strong preference of the owner of the property to have the proposed design incorporate a combination of brick and stucco. And that's as per the renderings that were shown earlier, which would have brick on the base of the building up to the sill of the second floor window, and then in-kind stucco on the upper floor. If we could move to the next slide. I'll just give a brief overview of the rationale that led to this design proposal from a couple of different perspectives. First of all, with respect to the district plan itself, it specifically identifies, and Ms. Kim commented on this as well, that the neighborhood is defined by quality cladding materials and craftsmanship. And as Ms. Kim noted, this building is a bit of an outlier in the neighborhood in that it has a fair amount of modesty in the way it was completed. And as was noted, Nofke was originally involved, and then when the building was constructed, had at that point was no longer involved in the project. We note in section 6.2 that brick is identified as the primary cladding material in the district, with more than 75% of homes being clad in brick. And again, this is identified as a high quality material that's durable and can be preserved. Additionally, and this is a bit of a interesting piece of information that was brought to our attention early in our consultation with Heritage staff. The image here is the fire insurance map that was issued for the neighborhood in 1932 and revised in 1945. The blue arrow indicates 207 Clemo, and the pink tone indicated, excuse me, for the house indicates that this was a brick building at the time. It's unclear whether this was error or that the building, in fact, has been altered over time. Next slide, please. One more observation I'll quickly point out is as we observe the foundation of the building that's visible a few inches above grade, there's a notable step in the foundation. It steps out from the face of the building. Again, it's unclear, but it's possible and conceivable that the original design of the foundation was set in such a way to contemplate or accommodate brick that was ultimately that is not now present on the building, but there's an uncertainty involved there. Next slide, please. The next theme I'd like to discuss is more thematic with respect to the influences of the design, the original design itself. The Heritage District Plan notes prairie style architecture.
1 minute left.
Prairie style is one of the design influences in the neighborhood, obviously heavily influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright. And we see a strong prevalence of brick base with upper floor stucco. Next slide, please. These are samples of Nofke, back one, please. Nofke samples of prairie style influence architecture. We see that the principal or a key design feature being a base of brick with a continuous horizontal sill at the second floor, and either brick or stucco above, as is proposed. Next slide, please. By contrast, many of Nofke's stucco-only houses, stucco-clad houses, are done in the Spanish style. We see a couple of other examples on Clemo and then others on Glebe Ave. These are very distinct from the house at 207, which is more aligned with the prairie style architecture. Next slide, please.
Time.
And thank you, Todd, for the presentation. I do see that Councillor Brockington has his hand raised for a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. And thank you for your presentation. Just so the subcommittee and myself are crystal clear, are you raising a concern with us that 1A specifically does not permit a reinstatement of stucco and brick? And are you suggesting that 1A be amended to reflect this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. We would propose that 1A be amended to allow for a combination of brick and stucco as per the design renderings.
Okay. I wanted that clarification, and then Chair, I'll follow up with Ms. Kim once we get to staff comments and questions.
Okay, thank you. Member Comforti also has a question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just had a question for Todd, and I was just curious if there was ever consideration by the design team and the client to clad everything in brick from the base all the way up. I know that you did give some really good examples of the prairie style that combines brick and stucco, and stuccos tends to be the secondary cladding in that style of architecture. And personally, I don't mind the combination, but I was just curious because there are, especially along Clemmo, there's quite a few examples of all brick clad structures. And I guess my second question would probably be for Mackenzie, so we'll get to that later. But I just wondered if staff had a problem with the combination of materials or the brick itself.
In response to that, the design strategy has always been a combination as proposed, and the reason for that, as I was trying to illustrate with the samples, is there's a strong horizontal line indicated in Nofke's original drawings at the sill of the second floor, which delineates a distinction between below and upper. And in many of the prairie style samples we looked at, that's typically a line that delineates between brick below as a stronger base and stucco above as an accent material. And so that was picking up on that detail, which is in the original drawings. It is present in the constructed house, although because it's all clad in a single material, it's not as visible. That is a feature that's there, and we feel it's a very defining feature of the house that can be accentuated through this proposal.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And I see that Vice Chair Quinn also has her hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question again about the combination. I'm just wondering about if you and the client have considered your color scheme. What color of brick, if you were to move forward with this, versus the color of the stucco. Part of perhaps the concern with the guidelines is maintaining some uniformity across the facade. And I'm just wondering, is there a contrast or is there an attempt to blend the two materials, using colors? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the concept renderings proposed indicate the general intent. However, specific coloration, we haven't got to the point of finally detailing the specific coloration. We would anticipate that being a continued collaboration between ourselves and heritage staff as material selection is made moving forward. And the general intent is not to radically alter the presentation of the house from a coloration point of view. So we would anticipate the coloration to be fairly consistent with what exists.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, thank you so much for your delegation. The next registered speaker is David Fleming from Heritage Ottawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse my confusion on the first item. I was participating in the meeting, but I hadn't logged in through the, I'd come in through the general website, but you had my written comments on that. As for this item, Heritage Ottawa is pleased to have the opportunity to comment on this comprehensive proposal to alter 207 Clemmo Avenue. The proponent should be congratulated on the decision to use the initial Nofke plan as an inspiration for the proposed alterations to the property. In preparing the recommendation, it is apparent that City Heritage staff have given serious consideration to the comments and concerns of the Glebe Community Association and the applicable Heritage Conservation District Plan guidelines. The proposal also appears to meet the applicable Parks Canada standards and guidelines, despite the request to move and raise the existing structure. We agree with the conditions concerning the repair of the stucco on both the ground floor facade and the upper floor attached to the approval. Any heritage conservation concerns about relocating the structure closer to the sidewalk has, in our opinion, been mitigated by the overall care and sensitivity reflected in this application. Heritage Ottawa is therefore pleased to support the staff recommendation, including the conditions set forth therein. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that there's a question from Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Fleming, thank you for your written and oral submissions today and always appreciated. Did you see the architect's presentation just before you spoke?
Yes, I did.
Their request to use both stucco and brick. You said you support the stucco concept, but would you oppose an amendment that would allow a stucco and brick combination?
I guess this is not a deal breaker, I don't think. I think there are a lot of other attributes to this application that make it very worthwhile. We were looking at it more from the sequence of how this should be done under the standards and guidelines. Obviously, you're looking at a stucco repair as being the best option. Certainly, I think the architect made a case that brick is predominant in a lot of other buildings in this district. We would still like them to go ahead with the stucco approach, but as I said, I don't think it's a deal breaker if the subcommittee decide to approve it with the brick and to amend it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And I don't see any other questions for Mr. Fleming. So I just wanted to also call upon John Stewart if he has a presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a lot more to add to this. I think that the idea of, and I'll just address the stucco and the brick and comment. We have a situation where in the attic, literally in the attic, we find Nofke drawings of the property, and they've provided the inspiration for a lot of what we're doing today with this building. It's a unique situation, and in terms of the brick, I think the fact that there was originally a brick ledge to support the brick. The second part is that for some reason the fire insurance map was convinced or committed to the fact that it was supposed to be a brick building. We did the research, and there was, in terms of testing under the stucco, there was no brick at that time, which doesn't mean it hadn't been brick at one stage and whether it was replaced or what have you. I think that we've taken the inspiration for the renovations based on the Nofke design and the design intent. And I think in some, there is a rationale for actually reintroducing the brick or introducing the brick. I think the opportunity is still there to maintain the upper second level as a stucco treatment. And in that way, we have the record of what was there as well. At one point, there was a proposal that we possibly would look at bricking the sides of the building and the back of the building and leave the front in stucco. And I think that perhaps is a bit too literal or a bit too scholarly approach. I think a lot of people would look at it and assume that the owner had run out of money or something. I don't think it would be a good approach. But long and short is, I agree with Mr. Fleming that it's not a deal breaker one way or the other. I think you have the new owner as the curator of this property for the next 100 years. And I think he would like to add a little bit of his own taste to this. And the idea of brick is something that he is quite anxious to see in place. I think there's historic documentation for the intent, and that possibly it's something that the committee would consider as a brick ground floor and the second floor maintaining the stucco as it is. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions for Mr. Stewart? Seeing none, does the committee have any questions for staff? And I see that Councillor Brockington has raised his hand.
Thank you, Chair. So, Ms. Kim, thank you for your presentation earlier on and your work as well on this file. Can you just comment on the stucco brick request from the architect on behalf of the homeowner? What are your thoughts on stucco and brick as opposed to just stucco?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Chair. This is certainly an issue that has come up throughout our conversations, and it's definitely a challenging one. And I think what it really comes down to is, how this project relates back to the standards and guidelines and the conservation district plan. So the standards and guidelines really speak to, understanding a building, understanding a historic place when you're moving forward with any type of alterations. And as John Stewart mentioned, that there was some investigation looking into the construction methods of this building, and it's a wood frame building with the stucco on the exterior lath. There was no brick found as part of that investigation. I think the fire insurance plan, certainly that's an important resource that we look to quite often. I'm not sure, it could be an error. I think it may have been in this case. And like I said, I think it really comes down to that, all of the standards and guidelines together, making sure that the integrity of the history and development of this property is maintained despite these alterations. I think if this was a new construction, a new house in the district, that would be a different conversation. The brick, would make it very compatible with the district, as the applicant had mentioned, very common material in the HCD. And also, this is the first application in the new district. It's the first test of the new plan. So I think it's really important, the policies are, the plan is divided into policies and guidelines, and this is a policy, and it's quite explicit about conserving the historic fabric. And so without the evidence to suggest that there was brick, I think the stucco is the most appropriate approach. Thanks.
Okay, I appreciate that. So using my layman's brain on heritage matters, if I heard you correctly, using brick or permitting brick in this case would not take away from the heritage district. It would not take away from the neighborhood, given other comparable houses that use brick. But if we look specifically at this house and the history of this house, brick has not been a component of this house. So it wouldn't be upholding the heritage history of this house. Have I stated that correctly?
I think that's fair to say.
Okay. All right. I have to think about this one. I'll listen to the local councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Menard has questions of staff.
Thanks so much, Chair. And just wanted to start by saying appreciate all the work that's gone in. Sorry, I don't have my camera on too. I'm in an awkward spot. So appreciate the work of yourself, the Glebe Community Association, the applicant as well. They've had very productive conversations for several months now, and Ms. Kim has been fantastic in moving this forward. I think it's important we recognize too that this conservation district just came into force just recently. I think this was a year and a half ago, and we had been in discussions with Mackenzie and others throughout this time, as well as the GCA, and came up, I think, with a good plan in this area. The community association has expressed their support for the recommendations that you see in front of you today, and that includes, I think, a fairly substantial support in that the application calls for a new placement of the dwelling and on its lot and a raising of the building onto that new foundation. So there is quite a change happening here, as you saw the movement of the building, and they've been accepting of that and in working in collaboration. I think there is reason to also support the staff recommendations as you see it currently, and that is based on best practice in the restoration and alteration of these heritage design buildings. So the issue, of course, that proposed replacement of that test verified original stucco cladding, it's recognized, of course, that the original cladding may need to be replaced for a variety of reasons, but the heritage best practices are clear that first call for repair in these situations, and secondly, if can't be repaired, then replaced in kind. And so I think the recommendations are correct in this case, and appreciate the collaboration on this. I know we're going to end up with a great project here. So thanks very much. Sorry, that's more of a comment, less than a question. Thanks, Chair.
That's fine. We always want to hear from the ward councillor. It's very important since you have the ear of the community. So thank you for those comments. Do we have any more questions for staff? Seeing none, do we have any members who want to add additional comments about this file? And I see that member Podolsky has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, for a chance to comment on it. I have to say at the outset that the level of discourse between Heritage Ottawa and Heritage staff and the proponent, the architect, and the Heritage consultant is at a very high level. I think we should be proud of this discussion because it's quite sophisticated. And I think that my observations are this project is a very sensitive and thoughtful one. I think that the remarkable thing is that it was originally a Nofke design, and confession here, I admire the work of Vernon Nofke. I've studied his buildings across the city, including one in my own neighborhood, which is very much the same proportion and designed and listed in the Heritage Impact Statement. I think that I support the staff recommendation with the exception that I do support the architect, owner, and Heritage consultant's request to permit brick on the ground floor. And for this very specific reason is that notwithstanding the fact that it would appear to violate standards and guidelines for historic places in Canada, but if it's treated as a new intervention, that under standard 11 of compatibility, it is very compatible. And I think there may not ever be any proof that Nofke imagined the base in brick with the stucco setback second floor level. I think that intuitively, I think, although we can't channel Nofke forward as a witness to this committee, I think that he would support it. And consequently, I think that it has merit, and it's very instructive in interpreting the Heritage District and interpreting Ottawa's heritage architects. So with that, I would just reiterate that I support the staff report, but do feel that if there are enough members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee to support the revision of Article 1A to permit the BRIC, I would encourage my colleagues to do that. So thank you very much.
Appreciate your comments. I see that member Comforti also has her hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and as I said before, I personally don't have a problem with the combination of materials, and I think I just wanted to echo Barry's sentiment. And I think, you know, as Todd explained, this is a very unique individual specific situation where they found the plans in the attic, and I think there is a lot to be said about restoring the original design intent rather than, you know, just maintaining what's there. I also have a soft spot for architectural clues and, you know, past sort of lives of the building, and the fact that the brick ledge is there. I don't know. I think there's I think this is a very unique case, and I think there's some wiggle room with the standard. So I would also support removing that first condition, condition A.
Thank you for those comments. I also see that Vice Chair Quinn has some comments as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just procedurally, do we need a motion? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think this is a bit of a tough one. I certainly respect where Mackenzie Kim is coming from, and also the councillor and members of the glebe community, and that this in some way, I'm sure they are seeing as a precedent-setting situation for their very new, newly minted Heritage Conservation District, and well-deserved one at that. But I do also want to congratulate all of the players involved in how collaborative this process has been and the effort that has been made. And I think at the end of the day, the house that we will have on Clement Avenue is going to be an improvement on the house that is there now. I suppose personally, I would feel more comfortable supporting the addition of brick, and I do see it as a new addition, not a re-addition. If there was a better sense of the color scheme, because I think that some uniformity across the facade would be important with the introduction of this new material. But for all the reasons mentioned, the positives associated with this, I too, to echo Mr. Fleming, don't see this as a deal breaker in support of the continuing go ahead with this project. So again, congratulations to everyone. It's been really good work.
I appreciate those comments, and I also see that Councillor Gower has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is difficult because staff clearly prefer the stucco approach. The community association prefers the stucco approach. Heritage Ottawa said it's not a deal breaker. Mr. Fleming from Heritage Ottawa said it's not a deal breaker, stucco versus brick, and several of our public members with heritage architecture expertise would not be opposed to the brick as well. I did hear something earlier about perhaps limiting the brick to a first floor. I'd be interested to hear staff's comments on that. Is that acceptable or appropriate of approach, or do you have comments on that, as limiting brick to the first floor and stucco on the other floors?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think so. The brick on the ground floor, that's I think that's the proposed way forward from the applicant, and I think there's still significant concerns from staff's perspective. even with the ground floor being brick, as I mentioned, just with conserving the integrity of the existing house.
If the specific recommendation, the staff report, needed to be changed, if it was simply changed to allow brick and stucco, does that give enough? I guess I want to make sure that we're still not giving too much of a free rein or a carte blanche to the applicant. I want to make sure that we're still taking into account the concerns that have been raised by the committee members and by staff. I guess, would staff have any recommendations if we were to add brick as an allowable material in that condition? Are there any restrictions or any wording or guidance that you would want to see in that if that change were to be made through a motion today?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think if this committee wishes to see the brick on the ground floor, it would be, you could just remove the first condition, which would, as the application, the recommendation would be according to plans submitted, which include that brick on the ground floor. I think, some of the other conditions with respect to material, providing material samples before the building permit, that could cover off some of the concerns, about color and treatment of the upper floor stucco. That could be addressed through the protection measures plan as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. I believe Councillor Brockington raised his hand.
So, Chair, just procedurally, when Ms. Kim says we would eliminate the first clause, is that 1A?
That's correct. Condition A, so recommendation 1.
So we would need an amending motion removing 1A.
Yeah, or we vote on everything except 1A, approve that, and then vote against 1A. Is that the cleanest way, Ms. Eric?
It would be an option to sever the condition from the remaining recommendations.
And just have 2 votes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So procedurally, that's probably the cleanest way to do it instead of moving a different motion. Okay. I had a procedural question, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that Vice Chair Quinn has also raised her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to be clear that the brick would not, and I think Mackenzie Kim addressed this, that the brick would only apply to the first story. The stucco would remain in the upper area. And certainly I like what you were saying around working with the applicant in terms of the exact materials involved with the selection of brick and the color palette. I think is going to be really important in this combination of materials working. I think that's really quite critical.
Thank you for that comment. Are there any more comments from the committee? Seeing none, we understand that this is obviously a unique scenario. I agree with much of what has been said by my colleagues, both public members and also councillors around the table, around the interest around this as a new intervention, which allows for better compatibility. And I understand the conundrum here because we're a Heritage Subcommittee and we're here to talk about the preservation of what has been originally built. But we also have seen an original plan come to the fore, which has a different combination than what was established initially. But it provides a very unique circumstance where the original vision of the designer, of the architect, can come to the fore. We also see that it is also challenging as well in terms of relocation. since we don't typically favor the relocation of buildings, but typically we would be against that. But repositioning historic contributing buildings are definitely not a proposal that staff would normally consider. However, in this case, we see that staff are supportive of the approach. It kind of levels the houses in a sense. And given that the identified character defining attributes of the Heritage Conservation District will ultimately be conserved by the reallocation, it seems to be another acceptable, unique scenario. We've heard on this motion, on this report before us, that it would require that 1A be severed procedurally for a vote. And we would have to vote against that first condition if we want to see the restoration of the original plan, and obviously vote in the affirmative for the rest of the conditions. So I don't know, Eric, if we are ready to proceed. Oh, and I do see that before we proceed, I see that Councillor Menard has raised his hand.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to make sure we're clear. I believe that 1A right now is referring to the stucco cladding on all aspects of the front of the building, both the lower and the upper sections, and that the concern would be removing that. It's not just the lower; it's the upper as well. And I guess I would go further and just say that I think it's important. The report really highlights why this is important in keeping that clause in there. And staff go through it, and what they say is that the HCD plan has very explicit policies about the conservation of historic cladding. And this is a brand new HCD, noting that if replacement is necessary, it should be completed in kind. Some investigation determined that the stucco is generally in good condition, so it's already in fairly good condition. However, no evidence of brick or any other material was found behind the stucco. Given that there's no historic evidence, staff are not in a position to support it. And it says there's no concerns with the proposed brick being used for the lower story at the rear or for the side addition, as this would help distinguish the original building and the new areas of that building being moved. Condition A would require the applicant to retain as much of the stucco on the existing house as possible, which again, they had pointed out earlier, is in actually fairly good condition. And it says in consultation with the heritage consultants. So where replacement is necessary, the stucco would need to match the existing as closely as possible, including its traditional application method and formula makeup. I think staff have outlined various reasons why it makes sense to approve this as is in their recommendation. And of course, the community has also indicated that, as have we, and I think the rest of the process has been exemplary. So to this point, I think just removing 1A would leave us at risk of the entire building moving to that condition. And I hope that folks do support the current recommendation in front of us. Thanks.
So my quick question to staff is, can there be any accommodation made through another mechanism rather than voting against condition 1A? Oh, and Leslie, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, can everybody hear me now? Yes. Okay. Sorry. I got these new headphones because I have my daughter home with me. So I can take this one. So, I mean, I think the removal of condition 1A will not actually result in the law, in our opinion, in the loss of the upper story stucco. I think that is still, it basically means that the applicant will get an approval for the plans as submitted, as opposed to the plans with the condition that has been proposed by staff and supported by staff. So we would be looking through the condition that Heritage Planning has proposed. Basically, we would want to see an entirely stucco facade as it is today. What the applicant has proposed is what you saw in the plans, which is partially brick. So if you remove condition 1A, they will get permission to build what is in the plans that are attached to the staff report. I think Mackenzie has made it quite clear that, you know, the rationale for staff's recommendation of that condition, and I don't think we support, you know, the removal of that condition, but if that is the way that the committee goes, then I don't think we're at risk of losing the remaining stucco on the building. I hope that answers the question.
And yeah, and just for clarity, you believe that that's within condition. So I'm just trying to ensure that that accommodates Councillor Menard's concerns, that if there is a change here, that stucco would still be retained through conditions. So that's what I'm hearing.
Yes, and it's shown on the plans. And so the heritage permit is tied to the plans as submitted. So if the committee goes this route and removes the condition, then it will be tied to the plans as submitted, which show stucco on the upper story.
Okay, that's fair. So at this point, we do have the amended, or I guess we don't have the amended report. We are going to vote in a segmented way on the report on 1A, and then on the rest of the items.
For clarity, Chair, the recommendation 1A is on the screen.
Sorry, and just for clarity, so the recommendation is to remove 1A.
If I understand correctly, the vote currently before the committee would be on 1A specifically, severed and on its own. The committee would then proceed to voting on the balance of the recommendations as noted by the chair.
Okay, thanks.
So on recommendation 1A, Member Halsall, Member Podolsky.
Yes, I vote to remove 1A. I don't know whether that's a yay or a nay, Mr. Pillow.
The vote is on the condition.
And the vote is to remove as a yay or remove as a nay, just in terms of procedure.
I'm in the hands of the committee and the chair on this one.
Okay.
My understanding is that 1A has been severed, and accordingly,
so he would vote no. I would suppose, if you are not in favor of that condition.
Understood. So for my vote, I vote no. Thank you.
Councillor Gower?
No.
Councillor McKenney?
Yes.
Member Conforti?
No.
Councillor Brockington?
No.
Councillor Moffat?
No.
Vice Chair Quinn?
No.
Chair King?
No.
1 yay, 7 nays. Chair, would you like a vote on the balance of the recommendations?
Yes, please. Or will it be carried?
Carried.
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 So the rest of the report is carried. This report is scheduled to be presented on to council on September 8th, 2021. Our next item is number 3, application to alter 65 Stewart Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Can staff please provide an overview of this report?
Good morning, everyone. This next application is to alter the Jarvis House, Part 4 property, under the Ontario Heritage Act at 65 Stewart. I'll just wait for the slides to appear on the screen. Okay, next slide, please. The property is located at 65 Stewart Street, located in Sandy Hill between King Edward Avenue and Cumberland Street. In the images, you can see that the house is set quite far back from its neighbors, and the property has many trees, making it difficult to see from the street. The property is located within the Sandy Hill West HCD. However, the property itself is only designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. At the time of the district designation under both Parts 4 and 5 of the Act were not permitted. Therefore, only provisions of Part 4 of the Act are applicable in this instance. Next slide. The house, known as Jarvis House, was designated in 1981 for its architectural interest. The house was built in 1885 in an eclectic Victorian style featuring wood clapboard with picturesque bargeboard, Italianate window framing, and a bay window. The polygonal veranda was added in the early 1900s. The house was originally owned by Samuel Jarvis of Pittaway Jarvis Photographers. Jarvis is responsible for much of the early turn of the century photography in Ottawa. Next slide. As mentioned, the house is set quite far back from the street compared to its neighbors, making it an outlier within the streetscape. The property has a large side yard, which features a one-story addition. Due to the dense tree cover on the property, this is difficult to see. I've included an older image from the springtime where you can see the house and the property better, as well as a 1979 photograph, which clearly shows the house and its side additions. This application is for the removal of some of the additions to make way for one larger addition to the side and rear of the property. Next slide. Here you can see the additions that will be removed as part of this application. It includes a side staircase at the front, a one-story addition at the side, a one-story entry at the rear, and 2 detached garages at the rear. Next slide. The new addition will be located to the side and rear of the Jarvis house. It will be set back, allowing the existing house to retain primacy on the lot, ensuring the character-defining front yard is maintained. The left image shows the additions that will be removed. Those are indicated in red, and the right image shows the new addition in navy blue. In addition to a heritage application, this proposal also requires approval under the Planning Act for site plan control, as well as a zoning bylaw amendment. While low-rise apartment building is permitted, site-specific amendments are proposed to address the height, the heritage overlay, landscaping, and yard requirements. Next slide. Here you can see the front and rear elevations. The addition will take design cues from the existing house in terms of window detailing, gable roof, and front porch. Next slide. This is the side elevations, the east and west side. The addition will be clad in a wood siding at the front with hardy plank on the sides and rear. A darker color palette will be used in order to distinguish the new construction. Next slide. The height of the new addition will be slightly taller than the Jarvis house, however, is set back approximately half the depth of the house in order to allow the original Jarvis house to dominate. To provide further separation between old and new, a recessed dormer window will be created on the second floor. Next slide. While the proposed addition to the building is not subordinate in size, the architect has incorporated several design elements to ensure that the heritage value of the Jarvis house is protected and compatible with the design of the house. The addition will take design cues from the Jarvis house in terms of window detailing, gable roof, and front porch. Wood will be used in the front of the addition, while hardy plank will be used on the sides and rear. Hardy plank is a material compatible with the wood clapboard seen on the existing house. To further distinguish itself, the addition will be colored in gray, while the clapboard on the Jarvis house is white. Simpler detailing will be used on the addition in order to allow the fine wood workmanship of the Jarvis house to remain the main focal point on the property. The addition will also be set back from the original house to allow the existing house to dominate. To further accentuate the differentiation between old and new, a recessed dormer will be created to clearly separate the mass of the existing house from the new construction. This will also help to break up the massing of the roof. Next slide. The proposal will maintain the existing west side yard, which will continue to be used for access for the rear neighbors. The east side yard, which is generally open, will contain the new addition and comply with the required side yard setback within the zoning bylaw. Much of the rear yard of a lot will comprise of the addition. Some planters and bushes will be installed in the rear to allow some greenery to the lot. The general approach to the Jarvis house will be one of preservation. In addition to removing some of the unsympathetic additions, the heritage attributes of the house will be maintained, including the cladding, the bargeboard, windows, and ornamental veranda. It is anticipated, however, that the portion of the polygonal veranda will require reconstruction due to the removal of the staircase addition to the east of the front entrance. Staff have therefore included a recommendation in the report that the historic door be used for the secondary staircase be used on the inside of the building. While not original to the house, it is believed that this door is an early addition. The staircase will be removed as part of the proposal, thus rendering the door obsolete. In order to salvage an early part of the building, heritage staff recommend that this be retained and reintroduced elsewhere. Staff also recommend that the conservation measures identified in the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement be included as conditions of approval to ensure they are implemented during construction as to retain and preserve the maximum amount of the veranda. As part of the Heritage Planning Branch's pre-consultation pilot program, Action Sandy Hills Heritage Committee participated in the pre-consultation meeting with the applicant. Heritage staff and Action Sandy Hill provide comments back to the applicant, raising concerns over height and massing. Heritage staff have since worked with the applicant to mitigate these concerns. And as such, next slide. Oh, sorry, I've missed a next slide. And again, well, there we go. Staff therefore recommend to approve the heritage permit conditional upon salvaging the door, implementing the conservation measures in the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement for the veranda, and having the exterior materials approved by staff. Staff also recommend to approve the landscape plan, which will see a new walkway at the side and the removal of 3 trees in the side yard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, for that presentation. We did receive correspondence from David Fleming from Heritage Ottawa, a letter dated August 27th, which is opposing the recommendations. We also did receive a letter from a resident with comments as well, which I believe also opposed the recommendations. We do have a number of registered speakers on behalf of the applicant. The first speaker is, I believe, from Novatech Engineering Planners and Landscape Architects. Actually, I think that Kayla Blakely is here to answer questions, but we do have a formal presentation from the architects from Robertson Martin Architects. And I don't know if Robert Martin is ready to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair and members of committee. So we have a short presentation that we'll run through. Certainly this house is one of the older crafted buildings within the district. It's surrounded by a much larger flat roof, multi-story properties. And so the challenge has been to accommodate intensification while still maintaining the primacy of Jarvis House. Next step, please. I'm next. Okay. Some of the context, again, the original heritage buildings and later additions to the north and adjacent properties. Next. So as it was touched on, there's considerable foliage in the front, and the idea is to maintain this foliage. Some of the early historic photos show larger trees to the north of the porch. But as you can see, the primary view from the street is toward the heritage porch. Next. Again, these later additions, not particularly well resolved, will be removed. Next. Again, a mix of older and more recent additions at the rear to be removed. Next. So I think we were quite taken with some of the intricacy of the crafted woodwork and all of this elements, and the leaded glass windows are to remain in the new scheme. Next. So again, a site plan, there was considerable engagement with city staff on this project and ways that we could, I guess, provide the required density for the project while still maintaining the primacy of the house. So that has involved a lot of material and massing explorations. The main move here is to set the addition to the rear so that the Jarvis House remains in the prime visual view. Next. So it's a multi-unit residential that sort of reoccupies or adaptively reuses the existing heritage structure while providing new code-required exit stairs and other required bikes and garbage and storage for the development. Next. And here's one of the front elevations. Again, the use of a gasket or reveal between the existing heritage building and the addition is one device that we're using. There was a lot of discussion with staff about roof parapets, and so in the final version, all of the roof is hidden behind the new roof. And as Ashley has mentioned, it's set back more than half the depth of the property. And we also have these material differentiations using a complementary palette in a darker color to allow the Jarvis House whiter woodwork to predominate. Next. In some of the side explorations, we are using sight lines. We've been a lot of sight line studies to place rooftop equipment and parapets to screen them from view from all aspects of the street. Next. And the rear is fairly simple. Again, the hardy board palette is complementary to the existing wood siding. Next. And this side yard with a small reveal for light into the units. To the right, we maintain the massive Jarvis House and the front octagonal porch. Next.
50 seconds left.
Okay, and these last few perspectives again just show that again maintaining the primacy, which has been extremely important to us. And the last image is without that foliage. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions from the committee for Robert? And I see that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Martin, for that presentation. Just to be clear, that the addition cladding on the front facade of the proposed addition, is it the hardy board or is it wood siding?
So the existing Jarvis House retains all of its wood clapboard siding, and the addition is using the complementary hardy boards horizontal siding, so similar vertical width, but different color and surface texture, obviously.
Including the front facade, not just the sides and the rear. Okay, thank you. The other question I had is about the front door. I understand it's going to be, an attempt is going to be made to reuse it in the interior of the building. It is a very decorative door. I'm just wondering what door is going to be, what will be the main entrance door? What is it going to look like?
Well, so the facades show the new entry door. I think our approach for the door right now is to use it at the main entrance there. So it's something that has, I guess, daily use and touch points. People actually engage with this door on a daily basis.
So it's a simple door.
Well, the reuse door is more ornate, but the door for the new addition is more simple. The idea is it's not competing with the Jarvis House fabric.
Oh, okay. So the historic door that is there now is retained, and where it is?
Yes.
It's not being moved.
No.
Okay, I misunderstood that. I thought that was going to be moved to the interior. And then just looking at the massing on the property, it's really filling the whole property. Very little wiggle room on the lane going either side and the rear. And I'm just wondering, the number of units, currently I think there are 2 units in the Jarvis House. How many units are we going to have if this goes forward?
I believe we're targeting 12.
12 units? Yep. I'm just thinking about, I don't see in the design any area that's going to handle garbage and all of that sort of thing. You're going to have a lot of people in there, and
so garbage is has been well addressed. The ward councillor, one of his preoccupations for this and any development in his ward is that of screening garbage from view. So there's a dedicated garbage room that is sort of hidden behind the side addition. So we don't have any accumulation of garbage. It's a separate air-conditioned, ventilated room. So it's well managed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you. And I see that Member Podolsky has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair Robert. Just a question that didn't seem to be revealed too clearly in the staff report. I understand the architectural treatment, the massing and the detailing and the color palette. But some of the comments that were made by Action Sandy Hill and community members have to do with the setback from the rear of the property, and I understand that you need to get variances from the Committee of Adjustment on that issue. Can you show the site plan and indicate where the required setback is and the variances that you're asking, just to help us understand the concerns of neighbors to the rear and the position of Action Sandy Hill on this?
Yeah, to my knowledge, there's no direct neighbor concerns. I think our owner's on the line, and he can talk about the engagement with adjacent neighbors who apparently have not expressed opposition to this. The existing condition, which can the site plan can be put on the screen, I guess, by Eric, but the we have an odd system of garages and laneways, so it's all rather tight and built up and paved in the backyard is in existing condition. So what is being proposed is very similar to the current set. You can see the existing rear garage, which is even closer. In fact, it goes over the property line. The garage shown in red, and so we're I guess addressing that. So in blue we have the you can see the setbacks. So the building is pulled back. The majority of it is pulled back to the rear yard setback, which is required. Does that help, Barry?
Sorry, is the required setback the line of the easement, or is the required setback for new construction further to the south? I'm just not clear. I'd like to understand that.
So the required setback is shown in blue, in dotted blue, and then we have an existing I guess garage which is being demolished. There's a right of way at the rear, so we're pulling our building back of the right of way because this right of way is used for access to adjacent property garages.
Unfortunately, sorry, the coloring of the blue line on the screen is not evident. Can you describe where it is from the rear lot line in terms of, or can somebody kind of point that out to me, because it's not clear on the screen? Sorry for that question.
Okay, so I think Eric or someone is moving a cursor. So on the west side we have the side yard setback. Yeah, that's the I guess westerly one, and then at the north, in blue, going across there, you have the property line, and I'm not sure if Novatech's on the call and can chime in on this too, but that might be helpful.
Yes, thank you for showing it. I now understand. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we also have Stéphane Gigret from Juxta Architects on the line as well. I don't know if you will be also providing a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. It's my intention just to provide a brief summary of the content of the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement. Essentially, as part of our analysis, we identified two main heritage features or elements related to the site and building that we recommended be preserved. The first one, of course, is the unique front yard setback, which provides a counterpoint to the otherwise uniform setbacks and provides a nice sense of privacy to the front of the building. And the second, of course, as previously noted by Rob, is the appearance of the street-facing facade, including the materials and detailing, the wooden barge board, the leaded glass windows, and the other original elements to the building. Of course, in our CHIS, we noted some other concerns, including the overall massing of the building. However, we did work with the architects. We made a series of recommendations related to setbacks, the use of gaskets, materials, and the elimination of the parapet, which was also something that city staff had requested. And the majority of these issues were addressed in the latest iteration of the architectural drawings. When we were developing the cultural heritage impact statement, as Ashley mentioned, this is a Part 4 designated building. However, of course, we could not ignore any potential impacts to the rest of the heritage district in which it resides. So, you know, we asked ourselves questions like, what would be the impact to a passerby on the street? How does this development affect the neighboring buildings and the overall atmosphere within the heritage district? And after some careful consideration, you know, this building, it's essentially a sort of single view building. It's bracketed on either sides by much taller, larger neighbors. One of them is a contemporary building. We simply didn't feel that the heritage elements which were being preserved were really at risk of being overwhelmed. The overall appearance of the building and the front facades and the streetscape were more or less going to be preserved from the point of view of the public. In general, we were comfortable with the overall approach that was shown in the final documents, and we feel that the architects did a good job of respecting the heritage elements that we identified, and we were pleased to see that they, you know, they assisted or they worked with us to address many of the concerns that were highlighted in our document. And that's our quick summary. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the summary. Are there any questions? Seeing none, our next delegation is the owner, Sam Elias.
I have nothing. Hello.
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 Oh, okay, so we can hear you.
I only say that thank you very much for hearing our application, and I would we have reached out to the neighbor during the early part of the development, and then we have no objection from the neighbors as of what we are proposed. And should you have any questions for us, and then we will be pleased to answer it.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. We have
Chair, I have a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
Mr. Elias, how long have you owned the property?
We purchased it almost a year ago.
And you knowingly purchased a heritage property, and was it your intent to always expand it for student housing?
Actually, the proposed development is not for student housing. It is going to be a unit as a 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom and bachelor. So it is not only the intention for a student, but however, due to the location of the property, we definitely don't mind to have a student living there.
I understand. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And apologies for that. I didn't see you raise your hand on the multiple things that are going on the screen. I don't see any other questions. So the next and the final delegate is David Fleming from Heritage Ottawa.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome the opportunity to comment on this application on its merits as an example of the heritage preservation of a property, Jarvis House, designated under Parts 4 and 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and as an adaptive reuse of the property, including an addition. If the subcommittee was being asked to judge the merits of the proposal solely on the preservation of the existing building on its current footprint, we would welcome the sensitive approach by the proponent and likely recommend support of the application. Even with a less obtrusive new addition, mostly tucked away in the rear and with a minimal encroachment on the side, we would support the removal of the later additions and would welcome an opportunity to comment on the substance of such an application. Alas, despite the care taken with the preservation of specific elements of the original house, the massing of the proposed addition, which would increase the size of the building by 135%, can only be seen as overwhelming the building and thus contrary to the conditions on which the heritage designation is based. As such, it is not consistent with the intent and spirit of the Parks Canada standards and guidelines, which form part of the Heritage Conservation District plans for those Sandy Hill Heritage Conservation Districts, which has such plans. We heartily support the specific comments from Action Sandy Hill, including their concerns as reflected in document 11 of the staff report. Approval of this proposal would destroy the heritage integrity of the property and would have an adverse effect on the integrity of the Heritage Conservation District. For these reasons, Heritage Ottawa urges the subcommittee to reject the recommendation of the staff report and recommend that Planning Committee and City Council do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for your comments. Are there any questions for Mr. Fleming? And I see none. So at this point, does the committee have any questions for staff? And I see that Councillor Brockington has his hand raised.
Thanks, Chair. Just some basic questions to start off for staff. Just to confirm, this property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act as per the agenda. The past speaker references Part 4 and Part 5. Just to clarify, this is just Part 4 designation, is that correct?
Thank you for the question. I realize it's a bit of an odd scenario here. The Part 4 designation happened in 1981, and the district that surrounds the property was 1994. At the time, the Ontario Heritage Act did not allow for double designation, so this property itself is technically not designated under both parts, because there's no new plan. At the time when a plan is in effect in Sandy Hill West, both parts 4 and 5 would be applicable for any alterations to this property.
Okay. If my home was designated under Part 4 outside of a district, and I wanted to do anything other than tear down the house, I don't have to appear before this committee, correct?
So I can repeat the question. So only a Part 4.
If I have Part 4 designation, but I'm not in a conservation heritage district, I'm just in a home by myself, and I want to alter my house, I don't want to tear down the house, I just want to make some modifications, I don't have to come before this committee.
Through you, Chair, you would need a heritage permit for alterations to the property. If it was interior only and the interior was not designated under Part 4, you would be permitted to make those alterations, but any exterior alterations would require a heritage permit and likely through approval through this committee if it was a large scale alteration.
So they are here for what reason? What triggers their appearance today? Is it because it's a large scale alteration or because they're in a conservation district?
Because it's a designated property and it's a larger proposal, staff have the delegated authority to approve small alterations and changes to properties.
What increase in size from the current building would staff say that's too big? That has just gone way too far.
The heritage staff don't specifically look at numbers. We look at the impact of the addition. So it's hard to say an exact number of what would be not permittable or suitable for an addition.
Can you comment then why this is suitable or acceptable to staff, the size, the expansion?
Yeah, certainly. Staff had initially raised concerns with the size and the height, as did Action Sandy Hill. We've worked with the applicant on reducing the mass, especially in the roof, pushing the addition farther back to decrease the overall appearance and decrease the actual footprint sizing of the addition, and using other tools that were referenced earlier, such as that gasket, that dormer window helped to separate the new and the old, reducing that roof. There was a parapet initially proposed on the addition. Staff have strongly encouraged the applicant to reduce that. That's been removed. So we've felt that they've done enough that it's not overwhelming the Jarvis House.
Okay. This one isn't as clear to me as the others as far as, I mean, I'm leaning towards supporting staff on this, but I did read at least one written objection that the size was an issue for some, but I wanted to get staff's professional perspective. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And Vice Chair Quinn has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Ashley. I just wanted to go back to it for clarity. You made mention of moving a door to the interior, and I'm a little confused based on what Robert Martin answered that question. So could you clarify that for me, please?
Certainly, thank you. There are two doors right now on the front of the Jarvis House. One is the main entrance to the house, and the second one is a secondary entrance. I believe a staircase to access the second floor, which is off the veranda. And that staircase is being removed as part of this project, and therefore the door that as access point will be obsolete. So staff believe this is to be a historic door, although not original to the house, and would like to see this historic fabric retained elsewhere on the property.
Thank you. I definitely had the doors confused, so glad I clarified that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that Councillor Gower has raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment. I think this is a very successful proposal in the design that they're proposing here. Just retaining a heritage building that's distinctive and maybe not the best suited to the present conditions, or sort of it's a site or that needs to have some careful intervention and creativity to make it work within this neighborhood. It's retaining the original home. It's not being demolished. It's adding 10 units in a way that breathes some new life into this building for generations to come. 10 units also being something that will be helpful towards addressing our housing supply issue here in Ottawa. So it's also surrounded on all sides by 3-story apartments. So it's kind of in a unique position on the street here. So I am supportive of what's in front of us today. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any more questions to staff? If not, are there any wrap-up comments? And I see that Member Podolsky has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In general, I think that the architectural treatment of the addition, even though it's significantly larger than the existing building, will have very little negative impact and possibly some neutral impact on the public realm. I think that the color palette treatment, the use of hardy plank, it is very sensitively done, and as are the other elevations, although not to the same level of success. I think that the troubling issue here is the impact of the addition on the rear yard and the enjoyment of light and space that the neighbors have clearly written about, even though the owner, and I think, Robert, you've said that you've consulted with the neighbors and there has been no objection to it. The committee has received letters co-signed by the owners of people on Daly Avenue that are concerned about the impact to the natural light in their rear yards. So I think that in some respects, although it's hard to differentiate, it is a planning issue of the positioning of this new addition in encroaching into the required rear yard, rather than a heritage character treatment. And therefore, I find it troubling and difficult to balance the two. And it's unfortunate that we don't have input from the land use planners about the impact of the addition and whether or not that is going to be supported from a planning perspective for its impact on the rear yard. So this is the troubling part of this excellently designed envelope treatment, but not necessarily massing that would satisfy the impact on the neighbors to the north.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any further comments by committee members? Seeing none, I would have to agree with Member Podolsky on the sense that there is definitely a massing challenge here in my estimation, which I actually feel goes above and beyond and does overwhelm the heritage elements, which I think is contrary to the conditions on which heritage designation is based. I appreciate the fact that it's not always the best conservation practice to incorporate elements from different periods of history, but it does occur and it happens in specific contexts. As a consequence, we try to do a lot of analysis on many of these buildings, and heritage staff does that to see whether the implementation is a reasonable one. Here, staff is saying that it is, and I can understand that based on some of the standards that we utilize for evaluation before us, especially conserving the heritage value and the character defining elements when creating any new addition to a historic place, and making sure that the new work physically and visually is compatible and subordinate to and distinguishable from a historic place. But at the same time, we do consider elements such as massing. And in my estimation, I think that the massing here is overwhelming of the heritage elements. And as a consequence, I won't be supporting this report before us today. So I just wanted to make my views clear before we head to looking at this report. So I will dissent on this report. Should we go to a full vote? And I don't see any response. So I think that others might just be in approval, might have hold this report for approval.
Approval.
Okay. So the report is ultimately carried with one dissent. This report is scheduled to be presented to Planning Committee on September 23rd, 2021. The next item before us is a status update concerning Built Heritage Subcommittee inquiries and motions for the period ended August 13th, 2021. There's no presentations from staff and no speakers are registered to date. This report is pretty pro forma. Does the committee have any questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, do any of the members have any comments on this item generally? Seeing none, is this report received?
Received.
Received.
Excellent, thank you. There are no in-camera items. No notices of motion have been received. There are no inquiries as well. Is there any other business? Seeing none, we are on adjournment. Is the motion carried?
Carried.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. The next regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, October 12th, 2021.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.